Chapter 1. Lost and Found. Rey Howard gripped the steering wheel like it was the last lifeline on Earth. The dashboard clock glowed 6:47 p.m., but the countryside outside his windshield had slipped into a darkness so complete it felt like midnight. His GPS, smug and unhelpful, displayed a single gray line and the words recalculating. For the 5th time in 10 minutes. Fantastic, Rey muttered, his voice swallowed by the hum of the engine. Middle of nowhere. Perfect start to my new life. The 2-lane road twisted like a ribbon through endless fields and forests, each curve promising civilization and delivering more shadows. He'd left the interstate an hour ago, chasing what he thought was a shortcut. Now, every horror movie he'd ever seen queued up in his mind like a greatest hits reel. Stranded car, ominous woods, mysterious noises. Great, just great. He checked his phone, no signal. Of course, why would there be? This was the kind of place where even satellites gave up. Rey exhaled slowly, trying to tamp down the rising panic. He wasn't antisocial, but he wasn't exactly the guy who thrived in chaos either. His life had been one long exercise in quiet routines, until 3 months ago, when his job imploded and his relationship followed suit like a domino effect. Now, here he was, 31, single, introverted, and driving toward a future he hadn't figured out yet. The plan, if you could call it that, was simple. Move to a new state, start fresh, find something interesting to do. Not just a paycheck. His last job had paid well, but at the cost of his soul. He'd sworn off dating co-workers after that disaster. Too risky, too messy, too everything. A sharp curve jolted him back to the present. He slowed, headlights sweeping over skeletal trees, and then, finally, something bright pierced the gloom. Rey blinked. In the distance, through the black lattice of branches, a house glowed like a beacon. Strings of Christmas lights draped every eave and railing, shimmering in reds, greens, and golds. Warm light spilled from tall windows, and was that music? Yes. Faint strains of laughter and carols floated across the cold night air. Relief surged through him so hard he laughed aloud. Thank you, whoever you are. He turned onto the gravel drive, tires crunching softly. As he approached, the scene sharpened. A sprawling house, Victorian maybe, its front yard dotted with cars, dozens of them, neatly parked like soldiers. 20 at least. Rey frowned. That was a lot of cars, a lot of people. Party, of course. 'Cause why wouldn't there be a party? He pulled up near the porch, killed the engine, and sat for a moment, debating. He needed directions. That was all. Quick in, quick out. No big deal. The porch was a riot of garlands and twinkling lights. A wreath the size of a hula hoop hung on the door, its red bow practically glowing. Rey climbed the steps, boots crunching on a dusting of snow, and knocked. The door swung open almost instantly, as if someone had been waiting. A man in his mid-40s stood there, grinning like Christmas morning personified. A Santa hat perched askew on his head, and a glass of something amber sloshed in his hand. Hey, you made it! The man boomed, voice rich with cheer. Come on in. The party's already started. Rey opened his mouth. Actually, But the man clapped him on the shoulder with the force of a friendly freight train and ushered him inside. Warmth enveloped Rey like a blanket. The scent of pine and cinnamon hit him first, followed by a kaleidoscope of color. Garlands, ribbons, a towering tree glittering with ornaments. People filled every corner, laughing, talking, balancing plates piled high with food. Before Rey could protest, the Santa-hatted man vanished into the crowd, leaving him stranded in a sea of strangers. Rey began, but someone else appeared. A woman in a red sweater, smiling brightly. You must be with Jenna, she said, grabbing his arm. Come on. Everyone's in the living room. No, I'm too late. He was swept along like a leaf in a current. Faces blurred past, voices overlapping. Grab a plate. Try the fudge. It's Aunt Linda's recipe. Punch? Careful, it bites. Every time Rey tried to explain. I'm not with Jenna. I'm not with anyone, I just need directions. Someone new interrupted, laughing, chatting, pressing food into his hands. Within 20 minutes, he gave up. They weren't listening. He now held a plate stacked with ham and mashed potatoes, a napkin sagging under cookies, and a cup of fruit punch that smelled suspiciously like future regrets. Finally, Rey escaped to a corner chair, sinking down with a sigh. He stared at the twinkling tree, wondering how to get out without looking like a lunatic. Maybe if he, mind if I sit? A voice asked. Rey looked up. An older woman stood there, elegant in a green velvet dress, silver hair swept into a bun. Her eyes sparkled with curiosity and authority. She lowered herself beside him with the grace of someone used to being obeyed. I don't recognize you, she said lightly. Who are you here with? Rey hesitated, then exhaled in relief. Finally, someone asking the right question. Honestly, he said, no one. I'm not supposed to be here. I was lost, just needed directions. And before I could explain, I got abducted by Christmas. The woman blinked, then her lips twitched. The twitch became a grin. The grin blossomed into a radiant smile. And then she burst out laughing so hard she had to stand, clutching her sides. The room fell silent. Conversations froze. Dozens of eyes turned toward the matriarch, who was now wiping tears of mirth from her cheeks. When she could breathe again, she raised a hand. Everyone listen. This young man, she gestured to Rey, still clutching his overloaded plate, isn't here with Jenna, or anyone. He knocked on the wrong door, and we kidnapped him. For a heartbeat, stunned silence. Then the granddaughter. Rey noticed her now standing near the tree, same age as him, eyes bright with amusement, laughed aloud. Wait, she said, grinning. We abducted a stranger and forced him to party with us? The room exploded in laughter. People clapped Rey on the back, voices overlapping in apology and delight. Stay anyway, someone called. It's dangerous to drive out there tonight. Rey opened his mouth to protest, but the warmth of the room, the laughter, the lights, the sheer absurdity, washed over him. And for the first time in months, he felt something unexpected. He felt glad he'd knocked on the wrong door. Chapter 2. The matriarch's laugh. Rey wasn't sure what stunned him more, the matriarch's laughter or the way the entire room froze like someone had hit pause on a holiday movie. For a split second, he wondered if he'd broken some sacred family code. Then the silence shattered into a tidal wave of laughter so loud it rattled the ornaments on the tree. People doubled over, clutching their sides. Someone dropped a cookie onto the carpet and didn't even notice. A man near the fireplace wiped tears from his eyes, gasping, We kidnapped him. Rey sat there, plate balanced precariously on his knees, cheeks burning. He wasn't sure whether to laugh along or crawl under the nearest couch. The matriarch, still radiant with amusement, patted his arm like he was the punchline to the best joke she'd heard in years. Oh, sweetheart, she said, voice warm and rich with mirth. You poor thing. You just wanted directions. Rey nodded, managing a sheepish smile. That was the plan. Well, she said, straightening with regal grace, you're not going anywhere tonight. Before Rey could respond, the granddaughter spoke up again, her voice carrying easily over the din. Seriously, Grandma? You're keeping him hostage now. The matriarch's eyes twinkled. Not hostage. Guess, there's a difference. Rey turned toward the voice, and froze. She was standing by the tree, a strand of lights casting a halo around her dark hair. Her sweater was a deep cranberry red, soft and casual, and her smile was trouble. The good kind. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second, and Rey felt something shift, like the floor had tilted just enough to make him catch his breath. He looked away quickly, pretending to adjust his plate. The matriarch clapped her hands, commanding attention like a general marshalling troops. Everyone listen up. This young man. Rey, was it? Yes, ma'am, Rey said, because what else could he say? Rey is staying the night. Roads are dangerous and we don't send people out into the dark. That's final. A chorus of agreement rippled through the room. Someone shouted, Make him a plate. Someone else added, Give him the good blanket. Rey opened his mouth to protest, but the matriarch silenced him with a look that brooked no argument. You'll stay, she said gently, and tomorrow we'll get you sorted. Tonight you eat. Rey hesitated, then nodded, because honestly, the thought of driving back into that black void made his stomach knot. And maybe, just maybe, he didn't mind staying. Not entirely. The party surged back to life, laughter and music weaving through the air like ribbons. Rey found himself swept along again, but this time with less resistance. People introduced themselves, cousins, aunts, uncles, neighbors, and he tried to keep up, names blurring into a festive haze. He learned the matriarch's name was Margaret, though everyone called her Maggie. She had the kind of presence that filled a room without trying, her laughter ringing like bells. And the granddaughter, the one with the cranberry sweater, was Emma. Just Emma. No titles, no qualifiers. When she shook his hand, her grip was firm, her eyes bright with mischief. So, she said, tilting her head, how does it feel to be abducted by Christmas? Rey chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. Honestly, I've had worse nights. Emma grinned. Good answer. Come on, I'll show you where the real food is. You've been stuck with the appetizer brigade. Before Rey could reply, she was already weaving through the crowd, and he followed like a man under a spell. The kitchen was a wonderland of aromas. Roast turkey, glazed ham, pies cooling on counters. Emma handed him a plate and pointed to the buffet. Load up, she said. You're officially family for the night. Rey hesitated, then smiled. That's generous. Emma shrugged, eyes dancing. We're a generous bunch. And honestly, you're the most interesting thing that's happened all week. Rey laughed, surprised at how easy it felt. Glad I could provide entertainment. Oh, you've done more than that, Emma said, smirking. You've given Grandma a story she'll tell for the next decade. Rey groaned. Great. Immortalized as the guy who knocked on the wrong door. Emma's smile softened. Could be worse. At least you didn't knock on the right one and end up at a boring party. He looked at her then, really looked, and something warm flickered in his chest. He didn't know what to do with it, so he focused on piling mashed potatoes onto his plate. Later, Rey found himself at a long dining table, wedged between a man who talked about fishing like it was a religion and a woman who insisted he try her cranberry sauce or live with regret forever. Conversation swirled around him. Stories, jokes, bursts of laughter. And for the first time in months, Rey felt included. Not like an outsider peering through glass, but part of something messy and vibrant and real. He caught Emma's eye across the table once, and she winked. Just a quick flicker, but it sent a jolt through him like static electricity. He looked away, pretending to be fascinated by the gravy boat. The fruit punch turned out to be exactly what he suspected, spiked with enough rum to make his ears warm. He sipped cautiously, determined not to add drunken stranger to his growing list of humiliations. By the time dessert rolled around, pies, cookies, something called Christmas crack, that was dangerously addictive. Rey's initial panic had melted into a strange, buoyant calm. He was still lost, still directionless, but for tonight that didn't matter. Tonight he was here. When the party began to wind down, Maggie appeared at his elbow like a benevolent spirit. "Come on, dear," she said, looping her arm through his. "Let's get you settled." Rey followed her upstairs to a cozy guest room with a quilted bedspread and a window overlooking the snowy yard. A small lamp cast a golden glow, and a sprig of holly sat in a vase on the dresser. Felt safe, like a haven carved out of chaos. "Thank you," Rey said quietly, "for all of this." Maggie smiled, eyes crinkling. "You were meant to knock on this door, Rey Howard. Life has a funny way of steering us where we need to be." Rey didn't know how to respond to that, so he just nodded. When she left, he sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the twinkling lights outside. Somewhere downstairs, laughter still drifted faintly through the halls. He thought about the road, the darkness, the uncertainty, and then about this house, glowing like a beacon in the night. About Maggie's laughter, about Emma's smile. Maybe, he thought, knocking on the wrong door wasn't a mistake after all. Chapter 3. Introductions and Interruption. Rey had never been the center of attention in his life. He'd spent 31 years perfecting the art of blending in, quiet, polite, the guy who remembered birthdays but never threw parties. Yet here he was, standing in the middle of a living room that looked like Christmas had exploded, surrounded by people laughing like they just discovered the funniest joke in history. And the joke was him. He managed a weak smile as the matriarch, whose name he'd learned was Margaret, patted his arm with grandmotherly authority. "Don't look so worried, dear. You're among friends now." Friends. Rey wasn't sure that word applied to people he'd met 30 minutes ago, but Margaret's tone left no room for argument. She turned to the crowd, her voice carrying like a conductor's baton. "Everyone, this is Rey Howard. He was lost, poor thing, and we kidnapped him." The laughter renewed, rippling through the room like a wave. Rey felt his ears burn. He opened his mouth to offer some kind of explanation, maybe a joke to deflect the awkwardness, but before he could speak, someone else cut in. "Rey, huh?" The voice was warm, teasing, and close enough to make him glance sideways. She stood there like she'd stepped out of a holiday card, dark hair tumbling over her shoulders, a green sweater that matched her eyes, and a smile that was equal parts amusement and curiosity. Rey recognized her instantly, the granddaughter who'd started the whole abduction joke. Margaret's grin widened as she noticed the exchange. "Ah, Jenna," Margaret said, eyes twinkling. "You were just saying his name." Jenna tilted her head, studying Rey like he was an interesting puzzle. "So you're the mysterious stranger we dragged in from the cold." Rey cleared his throat. Dragged might be generous. It was more like steamrolled. Her laugh was quick and bright, and Rey felt something shift in his chest, a flicker of warmth that had nothing to do with the roaring fireplace behind him. "Well," Jenna said, "you're here now, and trust me, you're safer in here than out there. These roads are a nightmare after dark." "I noticed," Rey said dryly. "My GPS decided I'm no longer on Earth." That earned another laugh, softer this time, and Rey found himself smiling back before he realized it. Jenna gestured toward the kitchen. "Come on. You look like you're about to bolt, and if you do, Aunt Linda will chase you down with a plate of fudge. Better to surrender willingly." Rey hesitated, then followed. The kitchen was a whirlwind of holiday chaos, counters buried under platters, the air thick with the scent of cinnamon and roasted turkey. Jenna moved through it like she belonged, snagging 2 mugs from a shelf and filling them with steaming cider. "Here," she said, handing him one. "Non-alcoholic. Unless you want the punch, but fair warning. It's basically a dare in liquid form." Rey accepted the mug gratefully. "I've already had 1 cup. Pretty sure it could power a small car." Jenna grinned. "Then you're officially part of the family." He took a sip, letting the warmth settle in his chest. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Not awkward, but comfortable, like the hush after snowfall. Rey studied her out of the corner of his eye, wondering what her story was. She seemed grounded, confident, the kind of person who thrived in a room full of laughter, which made her the exact opposite of him. "So," Jenna said, breaking the quiet, "what brings you to the middle of nowhere, besides fate and questionable GPS?" Rey hesitated. He could give the easy answer, just passing through, but something in her tone invited honesty. Maybe it was the way she leaned against the counter, casual and unhurried, like she had all the time in the world. I'm starting over, he said finally. New state, new life. No real plan yet. Her brows lifted. That's brave. Or reckless, Rey said. Depends on the day. Jenna smiled, but before she could reply, a voice boomed from the doorway. Jenna, quit hogging the guest. Rey turned as a man about his age strode in, grinning like they were old friends. I'm Kyle, he said, clapping Rey on the shoulder. Come on, we're doing Secret Santa. You're in. Wait, what? Rey sputtered, but Kyle was already steering him back toward the living room, Jenna trailing behind with an amused shake of her head. The next 20 minutes were a blur of names and laughter. Rey met cousins, aunts, uncles, and at least 3 dogs. Every introduction came with a joke about his kidnapping, and by the 10th one, Rey stopped trying to correct them. It was easier to smile and roll with it. When the Secret Santa chaos finally subsided, Rey found himself back in his corner chair, cider in hand, watching the room hum with energy. People teased and hugged, carols played softly in the background, and for the first time in months, Rey felt something he hadn't expected. He felt included. Jenna appeared again, sliding into the seat beside him. You survived, she said, eyes dancing. Barely, Rey said. I think your cousin tried to sign me up for karaoke. Oh, that's inevitable, Jenna said. We're a family of extroverts. You're basically a novelty. Rey chuckled, then sobered. I'm not great at this. Crowds, parties. Yet here you are, Jenna said softly. Maybe you're better at it than you think. Rey met her gaze, and for a moment, the noise around them faded. There was something in her eyes, warmth, curiosity, maybe even understanding, that made his chest tighten. Before he could speak, Margaret's voice rang out from across the room. Jenna, Rey, come help with the dessert table. Jenna rose, flashing him a grin. Duty calls. Come on, stranger. Rey followed, wondering how knocking on the wrong door had turned into the right decision, and why the thought of leaving suddenly felt complicated. Chapter 4. Dinner disasters and fruit punch regrets. By the time Rey sat down at the long dining table, he was convinced this family had a secret pact to keep him from escaping. Every time he drifted toward the door, someone intercepted him with a plate, a question, or, his personal favorite, a hug from a stranger who acted like they'd known him since kindergarten. Now, he was wedged between 2 conversational hurricanes. On his left, a man named Doug who spoke about fishing with the zeal of a prophet. On his right, Aunt Linda, who had a cranberry sauce agenda and wasn't afraid to evangelize. You haven't lived, Linda declared, spoon poised like a weapon, until you've tasted my cranberry sauce. It's tart, it's sweet, it's a spiritual experience. Rey smiled politely, trying to keep up. Sounds transformative. Linda beamed and plopped a scarlet mound onto his plate, nearly drowning the mashed potatoes. Rey stared at the crimson blob, wondering if spiritual experiences were supposed to jiggle. Doug leaned in, oblivious to Rey's silent plea for rescue. You fish? He asked, eyes gleaming. Not really, Rey admitted. Doug looked personally offended. You've never felt the thrill of reeling in a 20-pound bass at dawn? Rey shook his head. Can't say I have. Doug slapped the table, making the silverware jump. We'll fix that. Tomorrow morning, you and me, out on the lake. Rey opened his mouth to protest, but Linda cut in with a gasp. Tomorrow? He's helping us decorate the tree. Doug scowled. Tree can wait. Fish don't. Linda sniffed. Christmas doesn't wait either. Rey sat frozen, wondering if this was how custody battles felt. He took a sip of his punch for courage, and instantly regretted it. The fruity sweetness masked a sinister kick that burned all the way down. He coughed, eyes watering. Emma appeared like a lifeline, sliding into the empty chair across from him. Careful, she said, smirking. That punch has ruined reputations. Rey wiped his mouth, grimacing. Noted. What's in it? Emma grinned. Rum. Vodka. A splash of regret. Rey chuckled, tension easing. Good to know. She leaned forward, chin resting on her hand. So, Rey Howard, man of mystery, what brings you to our neck of the woods? Rey hesitated, fork hovering. He could give the short version, lost, GPS meltdown, accidental party crash, or the long one, which involved career implosions and existential dread. He opted for the short. Moving, he said simply. Starting over. Emma's brows lifted. Big move. Big enough, Rey said, stabbing a piece of ham. New state, new everything. Emma studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then she smiled. Brave. Rey snorted softly. Or stupid. Sometimes they're the same thing, Emma said, her voice gentle now. Either way, you ended up here. That's something. Rey met her gaze, and for a heartbeat, the room faded. The laughter, the clinking glasses, Doug's ongoing monologue about bait. All of it blurred into background noise. It was just her, eyes warm and steady, like she saw more than he was saying. Then someone shouted, Pie time! And the spell broke. Emma stood, flashing him a grin. Don't move. I'm bringing you the good stuff. Rey watched her disappear into the kitchen, pulse ticking faster than he liked to admit. Dessert was a battlefield of sugar. Plates of pecan pie, pumpkin pie, chocolate cake, and something called Christmas crack circulated like contraband. Ray surrendered to a slice of apple pie, which Linda insisted was life-changing. He wasn't sure about life-changing, but it was good enough to make him forget the cranberry sauce incident. The punch, however, was relentless. Every time his cup emptied, someone refilled it with a wink and a, "You look like you need this." Ray tried to pace himself, but by the third refill, his ears were warm and his laugh came too easily. At one point, Maggie, the matriarch, rose to make a toast. "To family," she declared, lifting her glass. "And to unexpected blessings." Her gaze landed on Ray, twinkling like a star. The room erupted in cheers, and Ray raised his cup, cheeks burning. Unexpected blessing. He wasn't sure he qualified, but the words lodged somewhere deep, stubborn, and strange. Later, when the plates were cleared and the music softened to a cozy hum, Ray drifted toward the living room. The Christmas tree dominated the space, a towering evergreen draped in lights and ornaments, its base surrounded by a fortress of wrapped gifts. People lounged on couches, chatting, sipping coffee. Emma sat cross-legged on the rug, laughing at something her cousin said. Ray hesitated in the doorway, then stepped inside. Emma looked up, her smile blooming like it had been waiting for him. "Survived dinner?" she teased. "Barely," Ray said, sinking into an armchair. "I think Doug signed me up for a fishing trip." Emma laughed. "Careful. He'll have you gutting trout before sunrise." Ray groaned. "I'm not a morning person." Emma's eyes sparkled. "Neither am I." Solidarity. They shared a smile, easy and warm. Ray felt that tilt again, the subtle shift like gravity had changed its mind. He didn't know what to do with it, so he just sat there, listening to the murmur of voices and the crackle of the fire. For the first time in months, he wasn't thinking about what he'd lost. He wasn't thinking about what came next. He was just here, and somehow that felt like enough. The night stretched on, soft and golden. When Ray finally climbed the stairs to his borrowed room, his head buzzed, not just from the punch, but from something lighter, brighter. He paused at the window, looking out at the snow-dusted yard, the twinkling lights, the dark road beyond. Tomorrow he'd figure out directions. Tomorrow he'd think about the future. Tonight, he let himself believe Maggie might be right. Maybe knocking on the wrong door was exactly what he needed. Chapter 5. The overnight decision. Ray stood at the foot of the staircase, coat in hand, staring at the front door like it was a portal to another world. Beyond that door lay the dark, twisting road that had swallowed his GPS whole. He could almost feel the cold pressing against the glass, the blackness waiting like a patient predator. Behind him, the house hummed with warmth and laughter. Someone was singing in the kitchen, off-key but enthusiastic. The scent of cinnamon and pine clung to the air like a promise. And upstairs, a guest room waited with a quilted bedspread and a lamp glowing softly, as if it had already decided he belonged there. Ray's fingers tightened on his coat. He could leave. He could insist. He could step back into the night and find his way, even if it meant crawling along back roads until dawn. He'd done harder things. He'd survived worse. But then Emma appeared in the hallway, carrying a tray of mugs steaming with cocoa. Her cranberry sweater had been swapped for something softer, a gray cardigan that looked like it had been borrowed from a cloud. She stopped when she saw him, one brow arching. "Planning your escape?" she asked, voice light but edged with curiosity. Ray hesitated. "Just thinking." Emma set the tray on a side table and crossed her arms, leaning against the wall. "Thinking about freezing to death in a ditch? Because that's what's waiting out there." He managed to smile. "You make it sound so inviting." Emma shrugged. "I'm practical. And honestly, you'd never make it. Roads are iced over, and the nearest motel is 20 miles away. You'd be lucky to find a gas station before midnight." Ray looked at the door again, then back at her. "I don't want to impose." Emma's expression softened. "You're not imposing. Grandma loves having a full house, and, well, you're kind of the highlight of the evening." Ray chuckled. "Glad I could provide entertainment." Emma grinned. "You did more than that. You gave us a story we'll tell for years. So stay. One night. No strings." Her tone was casual, but something in her eyes, warm, steady, made Ray's chest tighten. He thought about the empty apartment waiting for him in a town he barely knew. About the silence that had become his constant companion. About how, for the first time in months, he felt seen. "Okay," he said quietly. "One night." Emma's smile widened, bright enough to rival the Christmas lights outside. "Good choice. Come on. Cocoa's getting cold." The decision made, Ray felt an odd sense of relief wash over him, like unclenching a fist he hadn't realized he was holding. He hung his coat on the rack and followed Emma back to the living room, where the party had mellowed into cozy clusters of conversation. Maggie sat in her armchair like a queen surveying her court, a cat curled in her lap. When she saw Ray, her eyes twinkled. "Ah," she said, voice rich with satisfaction. "Our guest has come to his senses." Ray smiled sheepishly. "Seems safer than braving the wilderness." "Smart boy," Maggie said, patting the armrest. Life's too short to spend it lost in the dark. Emma handed him a mug of cocoa, topped with a mountain of whipped cream and a sprinkle of cinnamon. Ray accepted it gratefully, the warmth seeping into his fingers. He took a sip and nearly groaned aloud. It was perfect. Sweet, rich, comforting in a way that felt almost medicinal. Careful, Emma said, settling onto the couch beside him. Grandma spikes the cocoa. Ray blinked. With what? Emma smirked. Let's just say you'll sleep well tonight. The evening unfolded in gentle waves. The music softened to carols, voices blending in imperfect harmony. Someone started a fire in the hearth, and the crackle of logs added a rhythmic undertone to the laughter. Ray found himself drawn into conversations about holiday traditions, family stories, even a spirited debate over whether Die Hard counted as a Christmas movie. Emma argued yes passionately. Ray agreed, mostly because watching her defend Bruce Willis with that much conviction was oddly charming. At one point, Maggie beckoned him over and asked about his life. Ray hesitated, then offered the condensed version. Job gone, relationship gone, starting over. Her gaze was sharp but kind, like sunlight filtered through glass. Starting over is brave, she said simply. Most people cling to what's familiar, even when it hurts. Ray swallowed hard. Sometimes familiar feels safer. Maggie smiled. Safe isn't always good. Sometimes the wrong door leads to the right place. Her words lingered long after he returned to the couch, echoing in his mind like a refrain he couldn't shake. By midnight, the house had quieted. Guests drifted away, coats and scarves bundled against the cold. The family began clearing dishes, laughter punctuating the clatter of plates. Ray offered to help, but Maggie waved him off with regal authority. You're a guest, she said. Guests don't scrub pots. Emma, however, didn't let him off so easily. She handed him a towel and pointed to the drying rack. You can at least dry. Ray grinned. Fair enough. They worked side by side in companionable silence, the kitchen warm and fragrant with lingering spices. Every so often, their hands brushed, sending tiny sparks skittering up Ray's arm. He tried not to read too much into it, tried and failed. When the last dish was stacked, Emma leaned against the counter, arms folded. So, she said, what's your plan after tonight? Ray hesitated. Find my way back to the main road. Figure out what's next. Emma tilted her head. Big picture. He exhaled slowly. Big picture. I don't know. I just want something that feels worth it. Not just a paycheck. Emma studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then she smiled, a small, thoughtful curve of her lips. Sounds like you're looking for more than directions. Ray blinked. Maybe. Emma pushed off the counter, her cardigan swaying softly. Well, start with the easy part. Sleep. Tomorrow's another day. Upstairs, the guest room was a haven of quiet. Ray changed into the flannel pajamas Maggie had left on the bed, because of course she had, and sank onto the mattress with a sigh. The quilt smelled faintly of lavender, and the pillow cradled his head like a promise. He lay there in the dark, listening to the muffled sounds of the house settling. His mind replayed fragments of the evening. Maggie's laughter, Emma's wink, the warmth of cocoa spiked with something mischievous. He thought about the road, the cold, the emptiness, and then about this house, glowing like a beacon in the night. Maybe, he thought, starting over didn't have to mean starting alone. Sleep claimed him before he could decide what that meant. Chapter 6. Morning Mayhem. Ray woke to the sound of laughter echoing up the staircase. For a moment he lay still, disoriented. The quilted bedspread beneath his hands was soft and warm, the air faintly scented with pine and cinnamon. Sunlight streamed through the window, painting golden stripes across the floor. Outside, snow blanketed the yard in a pristine sheet, glittering like powdered sugar. Then memory rushed back. The winding road, the glowing house, the party that had swallowed him whole. The matriarch's laughter, Emma's smile, the fruit punch that could probably strip paint. Ray sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes. His phone lay on the nightstand, still stubbornly displaying no signal. He checked the time, 8:12 a.m. Early enough to make an escape before anyone noticed, maybe. Except, the laughter downstairs suggested the house was already buzzing. He swung his legs over the side of the bed, debating. He could slip out quietly, drive until he found a gas station, figure out where the universe wanted him to go next. That had been the plan, start fresh, no attachments, no complications. But then he pictured Maggie's warm smile, Emma's teasing grin, the way the house had felt last night. Alive, chaotic, full of something he hadn't realized he missed. Ray sighed. He wasn't leaving. Not yet. The hallway smelled like coffee and maple syrup. Ray followed the aroma down the stairs, his boots muffled by the runner rug. The living room was a whirlwind of activity. Kids darting between legs, adults juggling mugs and plates, carols playing softly from a speaker. The towering tree still glittered, now surrounded by a fortress of wrapped gifts. In the kitchen, chaos reigned supreme. Counters groaned under the weight of breakfast. Pancakes stacked like skyscrapers, bacon sizzling in pans, bowls of fruit, pitchers of orange juice. A man in flannel flipped pancakes with the confidence of a seasoned pro, while two women debated the merits of real maple syrup versus that bottled nonsense. And in the middle of it all stood Emma, hair pulled into a messy bun, sleeves pushed up, laughing as she tried to rescue a plate from a toddler determined to feed the dog. Ray hovered in the doorway, suddenly aware of how out of place he looked, jeans rumpled from sleep, hair doing its best impression of a haystack. Before he could retreat, Emma spotted him. "Well, look who survived the fruit punch," she called, grinning. "Morning, stranger." Ray managed a smile. "Morning. I wasn't sure if I should come down." Emma handed the rescued plate to the toddler's mother and crossed the kitchen, her cranberry sweater replaced by a soft gray hoodie. "Of course you should. You're practically family now. Grab a plate before the bacon disappears." Ray chuckled, tension easing. "Is it always this lively?" Emma glanced around at the controlled chaos, eyes sparkling. This is calm. You should see Christmas Eve." Ray laughed, and it felt good, easy, unforced. He accepted a plate and joined the buffet line, navigating between cousins and neighbors who greeted him like an old friend. Someone clapped him on the back, another offered him coffee, and before long, Ray found himself at the table with a mountain of pancakes and a mug steaming in his hands. Breakfast was loud and messy and perfect. Stories flew across the table like snowballs, childhood pranks, holiday disasters, Maggie's legendary eggnog incident of '09. Ray listened, smiling, occasionally chiming in when someone asked about him. "So, Ray," said the man in flannel Tom he'd learned, "what brings you out this way?" Ray hesitated, then opted for honesty. "Starting over, I guess. New state, new chapter." Tom nodded like that made perfect sense. "Good time for it. Fresh snow, fresh start." Emma, seated across from Ray, tilted her head. "Starting over how?" Ray met her gaze, something steady and curious in her eyes. "Just figuring things out. My last job wasn't exactly a dream gig." Emma's lips curved. "So you're looking for something better? Something different," Ray said. "Something that doesn't feel like selling my soul." Emma smiled softly, and Ray felt that strange flicker again, the one that made his chest tighten in a way he couldn't explain. After breakfast, the house erupted into what could only be described as festive mayhem. Kids raced to the yard for a snowball fight. Adults wrangled decorations. Someone wrestled with a string of lights that refused to cooperate. Maggie presided over it all like a benevolent queen, issuing orders with a twinkle in her eye. Ray found himself drafted into tree duty. Apparently, the family had a tradition of adding just one more ornament every morning until Christmas. Emma handed him a box of delicate glass baubles, her fingers brushing his as she passed it over. The contact was brief, but it sent a spark skittering up his arm. "Careful," she said, smiling. "Those are older than me." Ray cradled the box like it was made of gold. "No pressure, then." Emma laughed, and Ray couldn't help but join in. They worked side by side, hanging ornaments, adjusting ribbons, debating whether the angel on top looked smug or serene. Conversation flowed easily. Books they loved, movies they hated, the merits of real trees versus artificial. At one point, Emma glanced at him, her expression thoughtful. "You know," she said, "most people would have bolted the second they realized they'd crashed a family party." Ray shrugged, smiling faintly. "Maybe I needed a reason not to bolt." Emma's eyes softened, and for a heartbeat, the room seemed quieter, the laughter and music fading to a distant hum. Then a child shrieked with glee, and the moment dissolved like snow in sunlight. By midday, Ray had helped untangle lights, taste test cookies, and narrowly avoid being roped into caroling. He felt lighter, like the weight he'd been carrying for months had loosened, just a little. The house buzzed with warmth and noise, and for the first time in a long time, Ray didn't feel like an outsider looking in. He caught Emma's eye across the room once more, and she smiled. A small, private smile that made his pulse skip. Maybe Ray thought this wasn't just a detour. Maybe it was the start of something he hadn't planned but desperately needed. Chapter 7. Unexpected connections. The snow had thickened by afternoon, soft flakes drifting past the windows like confetti from a sky that couldn't resist celebrating. Outside, the yard was a winter postcard. White drifts, frosted trees, kids shrieking as they launched snowballs with reckless abandon. Inside, the house glowed with warmth, every corner humming with holiday energy. Ray stood near the fireplace, nursing a mug of coffee and wondering how he'd gone from lost traveler to honorary family member in less than 24 hours. He'd helped decorate the tree, taste-tested cookies, and even endured a spirited debate about whether tinsel was festive or tacky. Emma had argued for festive. Ray had agreed, mostly because disagreeing with her felt like a losing battle. Now the chaos had mellowed. Most of the family had scattered, some outside, some napping, some deep in conversation. Ray found himself alone in the living room, staring at the fire crackling in the hearth. The flames danced in shades of orange and gold, hypnotic in their rhythm. He let his thoughts drift, unspooling like thread. Starting over. The phrase sounded bold when he'd said it last night, but in truth, it felt more like fumbling in the dark. He had no roadmap, no grand plan, just a vague hope that somewhere out there was a life that didn't feel like a slow suffocation. His last job had paid well, sure, but at the cost of every ounce of joy. And his last relationship, well, that had gone up in flames so spectacularly it could have been televised. Ray sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. He wasn't antisocial. He wasn't bitter. He was just tired. Tired of pretending he was fine when he wasn't. Tired of chasing things that didn't matter. Deep thoughts? A voice said, warm and teasing. Ray turned, and there she was, Emma, leaning against the doorway like she'd been painted there, casual and effortless in a cream-colored sweater and jeans. Her hair was loose now, tumbling over her shoulders in waves that caught the firelight. She held a mug in one hand, her fingers curled around it like it was a secret. Ray managed to smile. Something like that. Emma crossed the room and sank onto the couch, curling one leg beneath her. You looked like you were about to solve the meaning of life. Ray chuckled. Not quite. Just thinking. Dangerous habit, Emma said lightly. What about? Ray hesitated, then shrugged. Starting over. What that even means. Emma tilted her head, studying him with eyes that seemed to see more than he said. Big topic for a snowy afternoon. Big topic for any day, Ray said quietly. Emma sipped her cocoa, then set the mug on the coffee table. You know, she said, most people don't start over because they're scared. Scared of failing. Scared of being alone. Ray met her gaze. Guess I'm scared of staying the same. Emma's lips curved. Not quite a smile, more like understanding made visible. That's braver than you think. Ray swallowed hard, the words lodging somewhere deep. He wanted to ask her something. What she was doing here, what her life looked like beyond this house. But before he could, she spoke again. So, Emma said, voice lighter now, what's the plan? After you escape our clutches. Ray laughed softly. Escape seems optimistic. Your grandma might chain me to the tree. Emma grinned. She likes you. That's rare. Ray raised a brow. Should I be flattered or terrified? Both, Emma said, eyes dancing. Then her tone softened. Seriously, what's next? Ray stared at the fire, watching the flames curl and leap. I don't know, he admitted. I thought I'd figure it out on the road. But the road didn't exactly cooperate. Emma leaned back, her expression thoughtful. Maybe that's the point. Ray frowned. The point? Emma gestured vaguely toward the window, where snowflakes swirled like tiny dancers. Sometimes the detour is the destination. Ray blinked, then laughed. A quiet, surprised sound. That sounds like something you'd find on a motivational poster. Emma grinned. Maybe. Doesn't mean it's wrong. Ray looked at her then really looked, at the curve of her smile, the warmth in her eyes, the way she seemed so rooted in herself, like she'd figured out something he hadn't. And for a moment, the weight he'd been carrying felt lighter, like someone had loosened the knots. The conversation drifted after that. Books they loved, movies they hated, the merits of real trees versus artificial. Emma teased him about his lack of holiday spirit. Ray countered by claiming he was a minimalist, which earned him a laugh that felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. At one point, Maggie appeared with a tray of cookies and a knowing smile that made Ray suspect she was orchestrating something behind the scenes. You two look cozy, she said, eyes twinkling. Emma rolled her eyes. Grandma. What? Maggie said innocently. I'm just saying. Cozy is good. Ray felt his ears warm, but Emma only laughed, tossing him a look that said welcome to the family circus. Later, when the house buzzed with preparations for dinner, Emma invited Ray to help string lights on the porch. They worked side by side in the crisp air, their breath puffing in white clouds, fingers brushing as they passed bulbs and hooks. Conversation flowed easily, punctuated by laughter when Ray nearly toppled off the step stool. You're a hazard, Emma teased, steadying him with a hand on his arm. Occupational hazard, Ray said, grinning. Of being tall. Emma shook her head, smiling. You're lucky I'm here to save you. Ray looked at her then, the winter light catching in her hair, and something in his chest shifted, quiet but undeniable. He didn't know what to do with it, so he just said, Guess I owe you. Emma's smile softened. Guess you do. By the time the lights were strung and glowing like captured stars, Ray felt something he hadn't felt in months, maybe years. Connection. Not forced, not fragile. Real. He didn't know what it meant yet, or where it would lead, but for the first time he wanted to find out. And as he followed Emma back inside, the warmth of the house wrapping around them like a blanket, Ray thought maybe, just maybe, the wrong door had opened to the right person. Chapter 8. The Christmas Tree Challenge. By the time Ray made it downstairs the next morning, the house was already humming like a beehive. Voices overlapped in cheerful chaos, the scent of coffee and cinnamon rolls curling through the air. He'd barely had time to pull on a sweater before Maggie intercepted him in the hallway, her eyes sparkling with mischief. Ah, there you are, she said, looping her arm through his like they'd known each other for years. Perfect timing. Today's the big event. Ray blinked. Big event. The Christmas Tree Challenge, Maggie announced, as if that explained everything. Family tradition. 2 teams, 1 tree each, and bragging rights until next December. Ray opened his mouth to protest. He was a guest, not a competitor. but Maggie was already steering him toward the living room, where pandemonium reigned. Boxes of ornaments were stacked like fortresses. Tinsel spilled across the carpet in glittering rivers. Two bare trees stood sentinel in opposite corners, their branches reaching skyward like challengers in a duel. Emma was there, of course. Cranberry sweater swapped for a soft gray one that somehow made her eyes look even brighter. She was kneeling by a box of ornaments, sorting them with the precision of a general planning an invasion. When she looked up and saw Rey, her smile curved slow and wicked. Well, she said. Looks like Grandma drafted you. Rey rubbed the back of his neck. Apparently. Emma rose gracefully, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Good. You're on my team. Rey blinked. Wait, what? You heard me. Emma crossed the room, her grin widening. Team Emma. We're going to crush them. Rey glanced toward the other tree, where a burly man in a flannel shirt was rallying his troops like a Viking warlord. Define crush. Emma leaned in conspiratorially, her voice low and teasing. Victory so sweet they'll taste it in their eggnog. Rey laughed despite himself. No pressure then. None at all, Emma said, handing him a spool of lights. Start with these. And don't tangle them, or you'll regret it. The challenge began with a countdown that sounded suspiciously like a battle cry. Music blared, festive, upbeat, slightly manic, and the room erupted into motion. Rey found himself stringing lights under Emma's sharp-eyed supervision, trying not to trip over boxes or impale himself on rogue branches. Higher, Emma said, gesturing. No, not like that. Wrap it tighter. Rey shot her a look. You're very demanding for someone who kidnapped me. Emma smirked. You're still here, aren't you? Point taken, Rey said, looping the cord as instructed. But if I get electrocuted, I'm haunting this tree. Emma laughed, a sound so warm it curled around him like the glow of the lights. Deal. As the decorating frenzy escalated, Rey began to notice things. Small things, but they lodged in his mind like ornaments on a branch. The way Emma's brow furrowed when she concentrated. The quick, efficient grace of her movements. The way she laughed with her whole face, eyes crinkling at the corners. He also noticed how competitive she was. By the time their tree was half-dressed, Emma had orchestrated a color scheme so flawless it could have graced a magazine cover. Gold and deep red, accented with white lights and delicate glass baubles. Rey, following orders like a good soldier, hung ornaments where she pointed, occasionally sneaking in a crooked one just to see her reaction. Seriously? She said, plucking the offender from the branch. Are you trying to sabotage us? Maybe, Rey said deadpan. I like chaos. Emma narrowed her eyes, then smiled slowly. Your trouble. Rey felt his pulse skip. You have no idea. The other team was loud and relentless, their tree a riot of color and clashing patterns. At one point, someone tried to bribe Maggie with a plate of cookies to declare them the winners in advance. Maggie, regal and incorruptible, waved them off with a laugh. When the final ornament was hung and the last strand of tinsel draped, the room fell silent for the grand reveal. Maggie made a show of inspecting both trees, her expression grave as a judge presiding over a high-stakes trial. Well, she said at last, I declare. The pause stretched like taffy. Rey held his breath. Emma crossed her fingers behind her back. A tie. Groans erupted from both sides. Emma threw her hands up in mock despair. A tie? After all that? Maggie's eyes twinkled. Both trees are beautiful, and that's what matters. Emma muttered something about matters to who under her breath, but Rey caught the smile tugging at her lips. He grinned, leaning close enough for her to hear. For what it's worth, he said softly. Ours is better. Emma glanced at him, her eyes bright with amusement. Obviously, the chaos dissolved into laughter and applause, and soon everyone was drifting toward the kitchen for cocoa and cookies. Rey lingered by the tree, watching the lights shimmer against the glass ornaments. It was perfect, warm, glowing, alive, like the house itself, like the people in it, like Emma. She appeared at his side a moment later, holding 2 mugs of cocoa. Here, she said, handing him one. You earned it. Rey accepted the mug, fingers brushing hers briefly. The contact was nothing, a whisper of skin, but it sent a spark through him so sharp he almost dropped the cocoa. Thanks, he said, voice a little rough. Emma sipped her drink, studying him over the rim. So Rey Howard, still regretting knocking on the wrong door. Rey looked at her, really looked, and felt something settle deep in his chest, a quiet certainty, like the click of a lock turning. Not even a little, he said. Emma's smile was slow and soft, like snow falling under starlight. Good. Later, when the house was quiet and the trees glowed in the dim light, Rey lay in bed staring at the ceiling. He thought about the challenge, the laughter, the cocoa. About Emma's smile and the way her voice curled around his name like it belonged there. He'd come here lost, directionless, chasing a future he couldn't define. And now he wasn't sure what tomorrow held. But for the first time in months, he wanted to find out. Chapter 9. The Confession Game. By evening, the house had transformed into something out of a snow globe, soft flakes drifting past frosted windows, the glow of Christmas lights shimmering against the dark. Ray stood near the fireplace, nursing a mug of cocoa and wondering how he'd gone from lost traveler to honorary family member in less than 48 hours. "Game time!" someone shouted, and the room erupted in cheers. Chairs scraped, laughter bubbled, and Ray found himself swept toward the living room like a leaf in a current. Emma appeared at his side, her gray sweater replaced by a deep green one that made her eyes look like polished jade. "What's happening?" Ray asked, trying to keep up. "Confession game," Emma said, grinning. "Family tradition. You draw a card, answer the question honestly, and if you refuse, you have to sing a Christmas carol solo." Ray blinked. "That's terrifying." Emma's smile widened. "Exactly, which is why everyone plays." Before Ray could protest, Maggie clapped her hands for silence. "All right, everyone, gather round." She held up a small tin brimming with folded cards. "Truth or tune, your choice." The circle formed quickly, cushions tossed onto the floor, mugs abandoned on tables. Ray ended up between Emma and a teenage boy who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Emma handed Ray a card with a flourish. "Your turn, stranger," she said, eyes dancing. Ray unfolded the card and read aloud. "What's one thing you swore you'd never do again?" The room hummed with anticipation. Ray felt heat creep up his neck. He could lie, say something harmless, like eat gas station sushi. But Emma's gaze held his like a tether, and suddenly the truth felt inevitable. He cleared his throat. "Date a coworker." A ripple of laughter swept through the circle, followed by curious murmurs. Emma tilted her head, intrigued. "That's oddly specific." Ray managed a wry smile. "Experience talking." "Do tell," Maggie said, her tone gentle but teasing. Ray hesitated, then sighed. "My last job and my last relationship ended at the same time. It was messy, costly. I promised myself I'd never mix the two again." The room softened, laughter fading into sympathetic nods. Emma's expression shifted, still curious, but warmer now, like candlelight instead of firelight. "That sounds rough," she said quietly. Ray shrugged, trying for casual. "It was. But it taught me something." "What's that?" Emma asked. Ray looked at her, really looked, and felt the words rise like a tide he couldn't stop. "That I want something different, something that matters. Not just a paycheck, not just convenience." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was charged, like the air before snow. Emma held his gaze for a long moment, then smiled softly. "Good answer," she said. The game rolled on, laughter and carols filling the room, but Ray barely noticed. His confession lingered like the echo of a bell, vibrating through his chest. He hadn't planned to say that. Not here, not now, but somehow it felt right, honest, necessary. When Emma's turn came, she drew a card and read aloud. "What's one thing you've always wanted to do but never had the courage?" She laughed, shaking her head. "Seriously? Who writes these?" "Answer the question," someone called. Emma tapped the card against her knee, thinking. Then she looked up, her eyes locking on Ray's. "Start something new," she said softly. "Something that scares me." Ray felt the words like a spark against dry tinder. He wanted to ask what she meant, what something looked like, but the game swept forward, voices rising, jokes flying. Still, her answer lodged in his mind, glowing like a candle in the dark. Later, when the circle dissolved and people drifted toward the kitchen for late-night snacks, Ray found himself alone by the tree. The lights shimmered against glass ornaments, casting soft halos on the walls. He traced a finger along a branch, thoughts tumbling like snowflakes. He'd come here lost, chasing a future he couldn't define. And now he wasn't sure what tomorrow held. But for the first time in months, he wanted to find out. "Deep thoughts?" a voice murmured. Ray turned. Emma stood there, a plate of cookies in one hand, her smile gentle and curious. "Something like that," Ray said. Emma stepped closer, offering the plate. "Fuel for thinking." Ray took a cookie, their fingers brushing briefly. The spark was there again, sharp, electric, undeniable. He swallowed hard. "About what you said," he began. "Starting something new." Emma tilted her head, eyes bright. "Yeah." Ray hesitated, then smiled faintly. "Maybe we're both doing that right now." Emma's breath caught, just a whisper, but Ray heard it, felt it, and in that moment, with the tree glowing and the house humming softly around them, he knew something had shifted, something real, something worth holding on to. Chapter 10. The kiss under the mistletoe. The house was quieter now, the earlier chaos distilled into a warm hum of conversation, and the soft strains of carols drifting from the old stereo in the corner. Snow fell steadily outside, frosting the windows in delicate lace. Ray stood near the archway between the living room and the hall, watching the family settle into clusters, some playing cards, others dozing in armchairs, the glow of the Christmas tree casting halos on their faces. He felt different, lighter, like something heavy had slipped off his shoulders without him noticing. Maybe it was the laughter, the cocoa, the way Maggie had winked at him earlier and said, "You belong here more than you think." Or maybe it was Emma, who had spent the last 2 days orbiting his thoughts like a star he couldn't stop tracking. He spotted her now across the room, laughing at something her cousin said. Her hair caught the light, a dark waterfall against the green of her sweater. When she glanced up and saw him watching, her smile curved slow and knowing, and Rey felt his pulse trip over itself. He didn't look away this time. Enjoying yourself? Emma's voice was soft when she reached him, her presence like a warm current in the cool air of the hallway. Rey smiled faintly. More than I expected. Emma tilted her head, eyes bright. Expected to hate it? Expected to feel out of place, Rey admitted. But I don't. Not anymore. Her smile deepened, something tender flickering in her gaze. Good. For a moment they just stood there, the quiet between them threaded with something electric. Rey wanted to say more, wanted to tell her how these 2 days had cracked something open inside him, but the words tangled in his throat. Emma glanced upward suddenly, and her lips twitched. Well, she murmured. Would you look at that? Rey frowned, following her gaze, and froze. A sprig of mistletoe dangled from the archway above them, tied with a red ribbon that swayed gently in the draft. Rey stared at it, then at Emma, whose expression was equal parts amusement and challenge. Seriously, Rey said, his voice rougher than he intended. That's convenient. Emma's smile was slow, wicked, and impossibly soft all at once. House rules, she said lightly. You know what that means. Rey swallowed hard, his heart thudding like a drum. He could joke, could laugh it off, step aside, but something in Emma's eyes held him fast. Something that said this wasn't just a game. Not for either of them. Guess I'd better follow the rules, Rey murmured. Emma's breath hitched. Just a whisper. But Rey heard it, felt it, and then he was stepping closer, the world narrowing to the glow of the tree behind her and the warmth of her body in front of him. His hand brushed her arm, tentative, then steadier when she didn't pull away. Her eyes met his, green and bright and unguarded. Rey, she whispered. And then there was no space left between them. The kiss was soft at first, hesitant, like a question asked in the dark. Then Emma's fingers curled into his sweater, and Rey's hand slid to her waist, and the question became an answer so clear it stole his breath. Warmth surged through him, fierce and sweet, melting every shard of doubt he'd carried for months. When they broke apart, the world felt different, brighter, sharper, alive. Emma's cheeks were flushed, her smile luminous. Not bad for a house rule, she said softly. Rey laughed, his forehead resting against hers. Best rule I've ever followed. They lingered there, mistletoe swaying above them, until the sound of Maggie's voice floated from the living room. Well, well, looks like the mistletoe worked its magic. Rey groaned, burying his face in Emma's shoulder as laughter rippled through the room. Emma just laughed, her arms looping around him briefly before she pulled back, eyes sparkling. Come on, she said, tugging his hand. Before they start taking pictures. Rey let her lead him into the glow of the tree, his heart still racing, his mind spinning with one undeniable truth. He hadn't just knocked on the wrong door. He'd found the right one. Chapter 11. The offer. Snow fell in lazy spirals outside the frosted windows, softening the world into a watercolor of white and silver. Inside, the house glowed with golden light, the hum of conversation weaving through the scent of cinnamon and pine. Rey stood near the fireplace, hands tucked into his pockets, watching the flames curl and leap like dancers. He felt restless, not in a bad way, but in the way that comes when something is shifting beneath your feet and you're not sure if it's solid ground or the edge of a cliff. He'd been here 3 days now, 3 days of laughter, cocoa, and chaos. 3 days of Emma's smile and Maggie's wisdom and a family that had folded him into their orbit like he'd always belonged. And yet, the question loomed like a shadow. What happens when this ends? He was still a man without a plan, still starting over without a map. And as much as he wanted to pretend he could stay in this warm bubble forever, reality waited beyond the snow-draped road. Penny for your thoughts? Emma's voice broke through his reverie, light and teasing. Rey turned, and there she was, leaning against the doorway like she'd been painted there, casual and effortless in a navy sweater and jeans. Her hair was loose, tumbling over her shoulders in waves that caught the firelight. She held 2 mugs in her hands, steam curling upward like whispers. Rey managed to smile. You'd need more than a penny. Emma crossed the room and handed him a mug. Hot chocolate. No punch this time, I promise. Rey accepted it gratefully, fingers brushing hers for a fleeting second. Thanks. Emma settled onto the couch, curling one leg beneath her. You looked like you were about to solve the meaning of life. Rey chuckled, sinking into the armchair opposite her. Not quite. Just wondering what comes next. Emma tilted her head, studying him with eyes that seemed to see more than he said. Big question. Big mess, Rey corrected softly. Emma sipped her cocoa, then set the mug on the coffee table. You know, she said, most people don't start over because they're scared. Scared of failing. Scared of being alone. Rey met her gaze. Guess I'm scared of staying the same. Emma's lips curved. Not quite a smile, more like understanding made visible. That's braver than you think. Rey swallowed hard, the words lodging somewhere deep. He wanted to ask her something, what she was doing here, what her life looked like beyond this house. But before he could, she spoke again. So, Emma said, voice lighter now, what's the plan? After you escape our clutches. Ray laughed softly. Escape seems optimistic. Your grandma might chain me to the tree. Emma grinned. She likes you. That's rare. Ray raised a brow. Should I be flattered or terrified? Both, Emma said, eyes dancing. Then her tone softened. Seriously, what's next? Ray stared at the fire, watching the flames curl and leap. I don't know, he admitted. I thought I'd figure it out on the road. But the road didn't exactly cooperate. Emma leaned back, her expression thoughtful. Maybe that's the point. Ray frowned. The point? Emma gestured vaguely toward the window, where snowflakes swirled like tiny dancers. Sometimes the detour is the destination. Ray blinked, then laughed. A quiet, surprised sound. That sounds like something you'd find on a motivational poster. Emma grinned. Maybe. Doesn't mean it's wrong. Ray looked at her, then really looked. At the curve of her smile, the warmth in her eyes, the way she seemed so rooted in herself, like she'd figured out something he hadn't. And for a moment, the weight he'd been carrying felt lighter, like someone had loosened the knots. The conversation drifted after that. Books they loved, movies they hated, the merits of real trees versus artificial. Emma teased him about his lack of holiday spirit. Ray countered by claiming he was a minimalist, which earned him a laugh that felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. At one point, Maggie appeared with a tray of cookies and a knowing smile that made Ray suspect she was orchestrating something behind the scenes. You two look cozy, she said, eyes twinkling. Emma rolled her eyes. Grandma. What? Maggie said innocently. I'm just saying. Cozy is good. Ray felt his ears warm, but Emma only laughed, tossing him a look that said welcome to the family circus. Later, when the house buzzed with preparations for dinner, Emma invited Ray to help string lights on the porch. They worked side by side in the crisp air, their breath puffing in white clouds, fingers brushing as they passed bulbs and hooks. Conversation flowed easily, punctuated by laughter when Ray nearly toppled off the step stool. You're a hazard, Emma teased, steadying him with a hand on his arm. Occupational hazard, Ray said, grinning. Of being tall. Emma shook her head, smiling. You're lucky I'm here to save you. Ray looked at her then, the winter light catching in her hair, and something in his chest shifted, quiet but undeniable. He didn't know what to do with it, so he just said, Guess I owe you. Emma's smile softened. Guess you do. By the time the lights were strung and glowing like captured stars, Ray felt something he hadn't felt in months, maybe years. Connection. Not forced, not fragile. Real. He didn't know what it meant yet, or where it would lead, but for the first time he wanted to find out. And as he followed Emma back inside, the warmth of the house wrapping around them like a blanket, Ray thought maybe, just maybe, the wrong door had opened to the right person. Chapter 12. The goodbye that isn't. The snow had stopped sometime during the night, leaving the world outside blanketed in white so pure it looked untouched by time. Ray stood at the window of the guest room, staring at the glittering expanse, his breath fogging the glass. The road beyond the trees was visible now, clear, navigable, a ribbon of possibility stretching toward the Lee. Bay he'd planned to rebuild. He should have felt relief. Instead, his chest felt heavy, like someone had slipped a stone behind his ribs. Downstairs, the house was alive with morning bustle, voices calling, laughter spilling through the halls, the clatter of dishes. The scent of coffee drifted up like an invitation, but Ray lingered at the window, coat draped over his arm, keys cold in his hand. It was time to go. That had been the deal, one night, then back to reality. He'd already stayed longer than he intended, long enough to help decorate trees, string lights, play ridiculous games that ended with him confessing more than he'd planned. Long enough to laugh until his stomach hurt. Long enough to feel something he hadn't felt in months. Too long. Ray exhaled slowly, forcing his feet to move. He slipped on his boots, shrugged into his coat, and headed downstairs, rehearsing the words in his head. Thank you for everything. You've been amazing. I'll never forget this. Simple, polite, detached. Except when he reached the bottom step, Emma was there. She stood in the hallway, hair loose around her shoulders, a soft cream sweater hugging her frame. Her hands were tucked into her pockets, but her eyes, those warm, steady eyes, locked on his like they'd been waiting. You're leaving, she said. Not a question. A statement. Ray swallowed hard. Yeah, roads are clear now. Emma nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. Right? Silence stretched between them, taut as a wire. Ray wanted to fill it, to explain, to say something that would make this easier. But nothing came, because nothing about this felt easy. Ray started, then stopped. He tried again. Thank you. For everything. You and your family, you didn't have to do any of this. Emma's lips curved, but it wasn't quite a smile. We wanted to. Ray's throat tightened. He gripped his keys like they were an anchor. I'll never forget it. Emma nodded again, her gaze steady. But there was something in her eyes now. A flicker of hurt, quickly masked. Safe travels, Ray. The words landed like a stone in his chest. He opened his mouth, desperate to say something, anything, but Maggie's voice floated from the kitchen, bright and oblivious. Ray, don't you dare leave without a cinnamon roll. Emma stepped back, giving him space, and Ray felt the moment slip like snow melting in his hands. He followed Maggie into the kitchen, accepted the cinnamon roll, endured hugs and laughter and promises to visit any time. He smiled, he thanked, he played the part. But when he stepped outside, the cold hit him like a slap, and so did the silence. The house loomed behind him, glowing with warmth, every window a square of golden light. He slid into his car, started the engine, and stared at the road. He could drive away. He should drive away. Instead, he sat there, hands gripping the wheel, heart pounding like a drum. He thought about the apartment waiting for him, empty, sterile, silent. He thought about the life he'd planned to rebuild, the one that suddenly felt hollow. And he thought about Emma, her laugh, her smile, the way she'd looked at him like she saw more than he said. Ray closed his eyes, exhaling hard. Then he killed the engine. The door creaked open, and Emma turned, startled. She was in the living room now, gathering stray ornaments, her hair catching the light like spun gold. When she saw him, her brows lifted. Forget something? She asked, voice careful. Ray stepped inside, snow melting on his boots, heart hammering like it wanted out of his chest. Yeah, he said softly. I forgot. I don't want to leave. Emma froze, her breath hitching. Ray. He crossed the room, words tumbling out now, raw and unpolished. I thought I needed to start over. I thought I needed to find something new. But then I knocked on this door, and he broke off, shaking his head. I don't know what this is, Emma. I just know I don't want it to end. For a heartbeat, silence. Then Emma smiled, a slow, radiant smile that made the world tilt. Good, she whispered, because neither do I. They stood there, the tree glowing behind them, the fire crackling softly, the air thick with something electric. Ray felt the weight he'd carried for months dissolve like frost under sunlight. He didn't know what tomorrow held. He didn't have a plan. But for the first time, he didn't need one. Chapter 13. The right door. The house was quieter now, the kind of hush that settles after a storm of laughter and clinking dishes. Outside, twilight draped the snow in shades of blue and silver, and the first stars pricked the sky like tiny lanterns. Inside, the Christmas lights glowed softly, casting warm halos across the walls. The tree shimmered in the corner, its ornaments catching the firelight like captured sparks. Ray stood in the living room, coat abandoned on a chair, heart still thudding from the words he'd spoken, and the ones Emma had answered with. He didn't want to leave. She didn't want him to. Simple. Impossible. Perfect. Emma appeared from the hallway, her steps light, her hair tumbling in loose waves that brushed her shoulders. She wore that same cream sweater, soft and understated, and somehow it made her look like the embodiment of every quiet thing Ray had ever wanted. Her eyes found his, and the smile that curved her lips was slow, certain, like it had been waiting all along. You came back, she said softly. Ray swallowed hard, his voice rough. I couldn't drive away. Emma's smile deepened, and for a moment, neither of them moved. The air between them felt charged, humming like a wire strung too tight. Ray wanted to close the distance, to say something that would make sense of the chaos in his chest. But then Maggie's voice floated from the kitchen, bright and oblivious. Emma, Ray, don't forget the mistletoe. Emma groaned, rolling her eyes toward the ceiling. Grandma, she muttered, but Ray caught the faint flush rising in her cheeks. Mistletoe? He asked, trying for casual and failing spectacularly. Emma gestured toward the archway leading to the dining room. Family tradition. She hangs it every year, claims it's good luck. Ray's gaze followed hers, and there it was, a sprig of mistletoe tied with a red ribbon, dangling from the doorway like a dare. Emma turned back to him, her expression unreadable, though her eyes held a glint that made Ray's pulse trip. We could ignore it, she said lightly. Ray's lips curved. Could we? Emma's breath hitched just a fraction, but Ray saw it, felt it, and suddenly, the world narrowed to the space between them, the glow of the lights, the soft crackle of the fire. He stepped closer, slow enough to give her time to stop him. She didn't. When he reached her, Ray lifted a hand, brushing a strand of hair from her face. His fingers lingered, tracing the curve of her cheek, and Emma's eyes fluttered shut for a heartbeat before opening again, bright and steady. Ray, she whispered. He didn't answer, not with words. He bent, closing the last inch of space, and kissed her. It wasn't hurried. It wasn't tentative. It was warm and deep and certain, like every laugh they'd shared, every glance that had lingered, every moment that had felt like more than coincidence had been leading here. Emma's hands slid to his chest, curling into his sweater, and Ray felt something inside him break open, something he hadn't realized he'd locked away. When they parted, breathless and smiling, Emma rested her forehead against his. Guess Grandma was right, she murmured. Good luck. Ray laughed softly, his thumb brushing her jaw. Feels like more than luck. Emma's smile widened, and Rey thought he could live in that smile forever. Later, they sat by the fire, cocoa steaming in their hands, the mistletoe swaying gently in the archway like a silent witness. Maggie passed through once, her eyes twinkling, and Rey swore he heard her mutter something about Christmas magic before disappearing into the kitchen. Emma leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder, and Rey felt the weight of the past months, the job that had drained him, the relationship that had burned out, slip away like snow melting under sunlight. He didn't know what tomorrow held. He didn't have a plan. But for the first time, he didn't need one. Because sometimes the wrong turn leads to the right door. And sometimes, the right door opens to the person you didn't know you were searching for. Epilogue. A new beginning. 2 weeks later, Rey stood on the porch of the same house that had changed everything. Snow still blanketed the yard, though the holiday lights had dimmed, their glow replaced by the soft promise of winter's quiet. His car was parked at the curb, not as an escape route this time, but as a bridge to something new. Inside, laughter drifted from the kitchen. Emma's laugh, bright and familiar, weaving through the hum of conversation. Rey smiled, the sound settling deep in his chest like it belonged there. He'd found an apartment in town, small, sunlit, close enough to hear church bells on Sunday mornings. And yesterday, he'd accepted a job at the local community center, helping design programs that mattered. Work that felt like building, not burning. But more than that, he'd found something he hadn't been looking for. Someone. Emma appeared in the doorway, hair tucked into a messy bun, cheeks flushed from the warmth inside. She grinned when she saw him, and Rey felt the same quiet certainty he'd felt under the mistletoe, that this wasn't luck. It was choice. It was home. "You ready?" she asked, slipping on her coat. Rey nodded, reaching for her hand. Always. They stepped into the crisp air together, the world stretching wide and white before them. And as Rey closed the door behind him, the wrong door that had turned out to be the right one, he knew this wasn't an ending. It was the beginning he'd been searching for all along.